Hello, and thank you for joining this Caterpillar webinar titled 4 Secrets to Leadership Excellence. I'm Abby Fansler with Caterpillar Safety Services, and I will facilitate our event today. Before I introduce today's presenter, I have a few announcements. This event will be about 1 hour long. It is being recorded and will be available for viewing within 1 minute after we conclude through our Bright Talk channel. If you would like to save the presentation slides, please click on the Attachments button above the presentation window to view and download a PDF version. We will be using the Votes tool at 4 points during today's presentation. When we land on a slide with a vote graphic and question, I will release the vote. Please click on the Votes button in the menu above the slides to cast your vote. If you have any questions or comments for our presenter, please use the Questions button, also in the menu bar above the slides. And we will read and respond to your questions at the end of David's presentation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you David Crouch. David is a Senior Safety Consultant and Regional Consulting Manager with Caterpillar Safety Services. He has worked in organizational development for more than 30 years, helping teams in a variety of industries use a values-driven approach to achieve cultural and operational excellence. Currently, David leads a team of safety culture consultants who facilitate leadership development and safety improvement processes inside Caterpillar's customer organizations. The tools and methodologies David will share today are embedded in Caterpillar's zero-incident performance process and are used throughout our enterprise to drive a culture of engagement and accountability. David is also a published author. His book, The Excellent Experience, is a blueprint for organizational, team, and individual success. And with that, David, let's get started.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Abby, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's a privilege to be with you on the call. Let me ask you a question. What if every leader in your organization possessed exactly what it took in order to lead and sustain a culture of safety excellence? How would that change what's happening in your organization right now? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today as we explore the 4 secrets to leadership excellence. Specifically, I want to first draw the link between effective leadership and safety excellence. I think most of you may see that as intuitive, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page, and that'll also lay a context for our discussion about the 4 secrets. Then I'll introduce you to those 4 secrets. I'll tell you how we came upon them, how we discovered them, and I'll talk to you about the 14 elements that make up those 4 secrets to leadership that will enable you and any leader in your organization to become a transformational safety leader. And hopefully, through our discussion, you will be inspired to do something different in your organization to develop the leadership skill in order to sustain the type of safety culture you desire. So let's dive in. John Baldoni, a consultant and author, said that leadership is an active living process. I like that. It's not a static skill. It's one that constantly evolves. He says it's rooted in character. I also like that. So do our leaders possess strong character? He said it's forged by experience. Many of us, I don't know about you, but I've learned as much about effective leadership from the mistakes I've made and the things I've seen in other leaders that I don't want to repeat. Experience is critical, and it's communicated by example. There's an element of role modeling. I know for much of what I've learned and apply in my own leadership style, I've learned from watching other leaders do what worked with me and those around me. And I try to set that example as well. The Chinese philosopher said this: when the best leader's work is done, the people say we did it ourselves. There's an element of leadership that involves engaging others in the journey so that people feel like they're a part of the solution and a part of the transformation. So how would you complete this sentence? On the slide you see it says a relationship. Many people not use that word to first describe what they think of when they try to complete the sentence leadership is. A lot of times I hear people say it's a challenge. It's complicated. It's not for everyone. It's a lot harder than being an employee. But rarely do I hear someone describe it as a relationship. But it certainly is, and I think we'll see that as we talk together. So let's talk about it in the context of a safety culture and how leadership affects it. At the bottom right of the screen, you can see the word incident in a box. So that represents any safety incident that might occur. The reason incidents occur, the reason you have them, is because someone took a risk. At-risk behavior is the single largest contributor to the cause of an incident. We know that conditions can cause incidents as well, but the instance of that occurring is much less. The largest cause of an incident is at-risk behavior. Somebody takes a risk. Why do they do that? Follow the box up, and you see attitudes, beliefs, and ideas. We've learned that people take risks. They make a choice in the moment because they have an attitude, idea, or a belief about the work that leads them to think that taking the risk is okay, or maybe it's even expected. Is it possible that some people think you expect them to take a shortcut in order to meet a deadline? Is it possible they could get that impression from you unintentionally simply by something you might say? Well, the answer to those questions is yes. So people have attitudes, ideas, and beliefs about the work that lead them to think that taking a risk is okay in the culture, in the environment, or maybe it's even expected. And that leads to incidents. So we're talking about what's normally accepted behavior in a group of people. That's what culture is. Normally accepted behavior among a group of people. So what's normally accepted in your organization? You know, I could ask you to show me or talk to me from your perspective as a leader. Talk to me about what you expect people to do to keep themselves and others safe. Tell me your intention and your sense of value around safety. And you could tell me a lot of things. And I'm sure you would mean every word that you would say. The issue is that sometimes we don't demonstrate our intent effectively. And people can be confused about what's expected or what you expect. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about communication. So attitudes, ideas, and beliefs lead to at-risk behavior. The largest single contributor to developing those attitudes, ideas, and beliefs about the work and the people that work in your organization is the leader. So the leader's understanding of that influence and then demonstrating on a regular, repeated basis, frequent basis, behaviors and ideas and actions that demonstrate that intent and create the right attitudes, the right ideas, the right beliefs about the work that lead people to understand you don't expect them to take a risk, that it's not acceptable, no matter how tough the demands on the project or how heavy the production demand, you expect them to work safely and make the right choice in the moment. So that's a healthy culture. What we find too often, though, is that the attitudes, ideas, and beliefs are there, most often not intentionally created, unintentionally created, underlying the culture that lead people to take risk. So we need to uncover those, and we need to understand our influence on those as leaders. Leadership, effective safety leadership, is critical to creating a culture of safety excellence. The bottom line. Dr. Dan Peterson, who many of you I'm sure are aware of, many consider Dr. Peterson the father of safety management principles. He's likened many times to Edwards Deming and his authorship, if you will, of the quality management movement in the 80s and 90s. Dr. Dan Peterson has identified through his 50 years of work 6 criteria for safety excellence. And I challenge you, as you read through those 6 bulleted phrases, ask yourself, how does leadership influence or affect each of these criteria? Or how is it involved with each of these criteria? And I challenge you to give me one of the 6 that does not involve effective safety leadership. So we need to understand our role as a leader. Everyone in your organization who is a leader needs to understand it, and understand that effective safety leadership is critical to implementing or adhering to these 6 criteria, fundamental to effective transformation. What you see here is our team's zero incident performance improvement process. It's much like what you might see in a Deming quality exercise, plan, do, check, act, or a Six Sigma project of continuous improvement. Our words may be a little different, but the concept is the same. You assess current state, understand it, engage leadership, build a plan for strategic deployment. You develop that plan, you implement it, and you check to see if it worked. Our approach involves employees at the front line in determining or helping us determine what's wrong in our culture with safety and what needs to be fixed, and then helping us determine the solutions to those issues. So if you're going to involve employees at different levels on continuous improvement teams to problem solve and create solutions to safety to improve the culture and move it forward, that requires leadership, support, guidance. So effective leadership belongs right in the middle of this circle where you see ZIP process. I would also place leadership excellence. It's critical to continuous improvement. So what's the definition? There's what the dictionary says. I like what's on the bottom of the slide better, personally. A leader is anybody that has a follower. Pretty simple way of looking at it. But if you think about it that way, it probably involves everybody. Because you have a follower, if anybody's looking to you and watching what you say and do, and then making decisions about what they say and do as a result of that. So leadership is influence. You have a follower if you're influencing someone else in any way. Everybody has followers. Everybody's a leader. There's 2 different types. You're either positional or emergent. You're a positional leader if you have a title or a position that indicates that you're a leader, like manager, supervisor, crew leader, foreman, vice president, director, CEO, president, and I'm sure there are others. Those are the ones that come to my mind when I think of positional leadership. If you have a title that communicates to others that you're in a leadership position, then you are a positional leader. But I think you'd agree with me that not all people that have a title that says they're a leader are effective leaders. You ever worked for a bad boss? I know I have. And my goal was to get away from them as soon as possible. Sometimes that meant leaving the organization. You know, the research tells us that people join an organization because of the reputation of the organization. They leave it because of their relationship with the boss. So positional leaders only who are not also effective or emergent leaders are not effective. They do not possess these 4 secrets we're going to reveal and the 14 elements that comprise them. So we want to strive to be an emergent leader. An emergent leader is simply a leader that emerges among a group of people because of the way they behave. People learn to respect them and want to follow them because of their effectiveness in influencing others toward the vision and the mission and demonstrating the values the group has determined are important and involving people along the way. So an emergent leader emerges because of their effectiveness, and people follow them willingly and voluntarily out of respect. That's what we're talking about, becoming. So as we searched out the question, what does it take to be an emergent leader, a transformational safety leader? What are the secrets? That was our question. We had a foundational premise that you can read on the screen. We believe that there were a list of these things, characteristics, attributes, whatever you want to call them, skills. There were certain things that if a person possesses them to a strong degree of capability, that it will enable them to create and sustain a zero-incident safety culture, an excellent safety culture. And we believe that those could be validated and that they could be predictive. So if someone possesses these things, we think you can reasonably predict that they should be able to create a strong safety culture where fewer, if any, people are hurt at the end of the day. Everybody goes home safe at the end of the day. And for that to transform your organization to a world-class performance level, all leaders at all levels need to be aligned in that pursuit. So we're talking about a foundation for understanding leadership effectiveness that applies to every leadership position in the organization, whether formal or informal, whether positional or emergent. And if you want to become emergent, this is what it requires. So we went to study. We went out in the world and tried to figure out what those secrets were. We didn't know there were 4 when we went on the search. That was the result of the research. So for the past 2 years, we've been studying the available literature. We studied our own data. We've studied a lot of work that Gallup did and other work of known leadership authors. We also referenced 4 decades of experiential research from our own experience of the people on our team. And we also partnered with an outside expert in Development Dimensions International. We actually hired a chief scientist from DDI to be on our research team to help us uncover and validate these secrets. So that was the journey we went on, and we found out a few things. Now what you see on the screen now are just a lot of adjectives in the gray background that describe leadership traits, qualities, characteristics, behaviors, etc. Those are a list of many of the things we learned in our research. There are far too many to work with when you study all of the leadership literature on the market. And I said all. We didn't study it all. We studied a cross-section of only 150 resources. If you Google leadership or effective leadership, you get about 11,637,321 resources. So we didn't study all of those. We studied about 150, a cross-section and a representative sample, along with the other things I shared with you. And as we did our affinity diagramming, we realized there were 4 main things that all of these things relate to. So you can look at the list. We came up with, our list was about 500 characteristics long, and we did an affinity diagram on those 500 characteristics, and there were 4 main themes, if you will, 4 key secrets that emerged through that process. Here they are. The effective emergent safety leader, the transformational safety leader, must drive a culture of accountability. People have to understand, well, I'll get into that in a minute. They must create connectedness. People have to be involved. They must demonstrate credible consciousness. We'll talk about what that is. That might be a new phrase. And they must build trust among the people they lead. So there's the 4 big ideas, if you will, the 4 secrets to transformational safety leadership. So now we'll dive into those a little bit and explore them. And at the end, we'll open up for any questions that you might have. So let's start with number 1, driving a culture of accountability. Oh, before I get there, I wanted to just remind you of the 6 criteria and illustrate in red the three of those criteria deal with basically your org chart as you migrate up or down it. The 4th one is front line. So we're talking about, you remember I said that it must be aligned, effective leadership must be aligned at all levels of the organization. So we're talking about 4 secrets and 14 domains or 14 elements of leadership that will apply at all levels of leadership in your organization. So the first one, driving a culture of accountability. Have you ever heard anybody use these phrases? My favorite one's that last bullet. I didn't get the email. You know, if you expect someone to do something and you get one of these responses because they didn't do it, I would suggest to you that there's something amiss in your culture of accountability. That something messed up along the way. So what is that? How do you know if you have a strong culture of accountability? How do you drive that as a leader? Well, Zig Ziglar said you've got to inspect what you expect. I like that phrase. So there's an element of, he used the word inspect. I know when we're talking about safety, that sounds like a policeman's word. Don't like it personally. but it rhymes with expect, so I use the phrase anyway. But what we're talking about is measurement. Somebody has to pay attention to what's happening. So there's an element of measurement in accountability, according to Ziegler. Dr. Peterson said we can't get safety excellent without it. So he knew that accountability was critical. In my book, I said it this way: excellence requires consistency in accountability. So there has to be a culture of accountability. The leader has to set it up, drive it, and keep it in play on a consistent basis. Here's the definition. There's that hold versus take thing about accountability. You know, we always hear people, I don't know about you, but I've always heard people all my career say, my job is to hold others accountable for what they're supposed to do. Well, okay. I'll go along with that. But as a leader myself, with currently 11 direct reports, adding 2 more shortly, I don't like that concept. And I don't want to present myself to my team with that thinking. Now, yeah, my boss is holding me accountable for holding others on my team accountable for what they're supposed to do, no question about it. But I prefer to view it as creating a culture in my team where each individual takes accountability for their commitments, for their expectations, for what they're supposed to do. Subtle difference, but I think it's a powerful one that a transformational leader needs to understand when it comes to accountability. You want to drive accountability, get people to voluntarily do what they're supposed to do. That's more difficult than holding them accountable, if you ask me, because holding them accountable puts the onus on me, and now I'm doing something to hold them accountable. Okay? And that involves, that sounds a lot like a directing type of leadership that sometimes is necessary, but as an overall style is most often times not effective. Whereas if I require you to take accountability, I still have to do some work. Of course, I'm not saying the leader is exempt from the work. I'm just saying that when I create a culture where you take accountability, then you know what you need to do and you do it on a regular basis. I've just got to pay attention and give you some feedback. It's a lot more effective when you do it voluntarily. And plus, my team's virtual. And I know many of you don't see the people that you lead either all the time. Nobody's with someone all the time except that person themselves, right? That's why I tell people, you're the most qualified person to assess your own performance because you're the only one with you all the time. Well, since that's the case, then I need you to take accountability. I need you to make the safe choice in the moment no matter who's looking. I need you as a leader. If you report to me and you're a leader, I need you to lead effectively no matter who else is around. So I need you to take accountability. So I choose to view it from that perspective. It's the opposite of blaming. So how does a leader create a strong culture of accountability? Well, here's what it looks like in practice. Everybody on the team knows what's expected. They know how it's measured. High-quality training is provided to ensure competence. Appropriate feedback is provided to ensure accuracy of execution, and all employees have the resources they need to do their work. So there are things a leader must do to set up and create and drive a strong culture of accountability. Now, you should see the vote button on your screen. So I'd like you to click on that, if you will, and answer the question, how would you rate the leadership group in your organization right now on its current ability to drive accountability among working relationships at all levels? You have a scale from very strong to very weak. So while you're doing that, I'm going to continue to talk a little bit, and we'll look at the results here in just a moment. So vote, if you will. And on the screen now is a model of effective accountability with 5 key elements a leader must develop strong skill in order to create and sustain a culture of strong accountability, to build it, to drive it, to sustain it. Step number 1 is defined expectations. So if you report to me, it's my responsibility to make sure you know exactly what's expected of you in your role. And from a safety perspective, we're typically pretty good at that at the front line. PPE, safety procedures around operational equipment, and the processes that we ask people to execute on a regular basis to do the work. what we've learned in our work, and working with thousands of organizations over several decades, helping them transform their culture to one of safety excellence, what we've learned is that as you work up the org chart, many times those defined safety expectations become fuzzy, unclear, perhaps not even existent at middle and upper management levels. A lot of times I talk to executive groups, and they just don't know what they should do on a regular basis to keep themselves and others safe. They don't understand their role in creating and sustaining that strong safety culture. Middle managers, too, sometimes are just completely left out of the safety process. They have no specific expectations other than maybe reading a report produced by someone else. So defined expectations, it's the leader's role, regardless of the level of the organization. If you report to me, it's my responsibility to make sure you know exactly what's expected in your role. And specifically, since we're focusing on this from a safety perspective, specifically what's expected of you in safety. So, for example, one thing that might be expected of an executive leader would be something like visit the work site twice a year, and while you're there, notice something that people are doing safely and say something to them about it. Very powerful concept of encouragement and noticing what's right. And that could be a simple expectation of an executive leader. That's an example. All right, so expectations must be clear. Clearly defined, clearly understood. Step one to driving a culture of accountability. Step two, I got to train you, or I got to make sure you're trained. If you report to me, I got to make sure that not only do you know what's expected, but you know how to do it right. So that's an element of training. We just simply say the leader's job is to train, to ensure effective training. High quality training. Not just checking the box training. But every person that reports to the leader must know how to do their work safely and accurately. This is the know-how. Learning how to do it. Most people understand that part. But they don't understand necessarily how it fits among this four-step model. So now I've communicated to you what's expected. I've enabled effective, high-quality training so you know how to do it right. The next thing is now I got to pay attention. Somehow I need to measure your execution of what's expected of the work. Measure your execution. So Zig said you got to inspect what you expect. Well, there it is. Measurement. There's really two main forms of measurement, I suppose. One is I can see you do it. Observation, right? If you're expected to do something and you and I have agreed, you've been trained how, you know how to do it right. Now the only thing to do is watch you do it and see if you do it right, right? And either you do it right or you do it wrong. That leads to step 4, so I'll pause right there before I won't go any further right now. So that's observations one. Another way is, I have a virtual team. I have a team of consultants, and they work all over North America. They work from their homes. Only a couple of times a year are we face-to-face. Makes it a little more challenging. So my observation of their work is not as often eyes-on. I get feedback in other ways. I look at reports. I look at customer responses. I look at their reports of the work. I hear from other people that did see them do the work. I have multiple inputs that help me understand the quality of their execution when they're doing what's expected. So that's also measurement. You can have other types of inputs. Reports, comments from other people, and so forth. All right, so you got to know what's expected. You got to know how to do it right. And then somebody's got to pay attention to observe execution. And once that's done, then I have an opportunity to provide feedback. That's step 4. So I observed your work, or I measured it in some way. I become aware of your execution. And I have now a response. If I want to drive a culture of safety accountability, here's the one. This one's quite critical. And there's a piece of feedback that we most often miss because it just doesn't come natural to most of us. And here it is. I'll go ahead and give you this one. This is a nugget you can take to the bank right now and put this in practice tomorrow. and you will begin to transform the culture in the people that report to you, your team. When you see somebody do something right, when you see them do what you've communicated you expect them to do, when you see them do it right, you see them do it well with high quality, acknowledge that. Say something to them about it. That's called positive recognition. Powerful concept. Here's the principle. Here's the way I say it in my book. I said the more you recognize the good things people do, the right things people do, the safe things people do, the less you have to deal with the bad, the wrong, the unsafe. So the more you recognize the good, the less you have to deal with the bad. It's a powerful principle of human nature that if we put it into practice as leaders, that in and of itself is a very powerful single change in our action as a leader that will have a positive, dramatic impact on the culture of your team and driving accountability. Challenge you to use it today. When you get off the webinar, find somebody that reports to you, observe them doing the work right, and say something to them about it in a specific and quality way. I'm not just saying attaboy or a good job. I'm looking right now at Abby. She's in the room with me that you met at the beginning of the call. And I want to go to Abby and say, I can say, Abby, the way you opened that call was awesome. I love the way that you were very professional in your vocal tone, the way that you were prepared. It was obvious that you had prepared what you were going to say. You said it very professionally. Did you see how it was specific? It's very closely following the action. And I've just encouraged her. Is there any doubt that Abby would, in Abby's mind, that she would know what she did right? And then what's the likelihood that she will repeat that again in the future? Dr. Peterson said what gets recognized gets repeated. What gets measured gets done. So that's what we're talking about. Feedback's critical. Now, people don't always do things right. So there's another piece of feedback. That's when they do it wrong. Or there's something that's not quite right. Whether it's an unsafe act, not following a procedure, or anything, it doesn't have to be safety related, then I need to deal with that as well. And I like to use the phrase, my action there as a leader is to coach for improvement. I start with coaching for improvement. Too often we start with discipline. And we jump right to blaming somebody for what they did, making that mistake, and a disciplinary corrective action is our first approach. That's a mistake. One main reason it's a mistake is because if you recall that slide that had 5 boxes on it, talked about what's the cause of incidents, it's culture, and in the middle was attitudes, ideas, and beliefs about the work that lead people to think that taking a risk is okay or maybe even expected. So you remember that? Well, and you remember we said the largest or the most significant single contributor to those attitudes, beliefs, and ideas is the leader? Well, before you jump down somebody's throat for working unsafely, I want to encourage you to ask yourself the question, is it possible that I have unintentionally communicated to my team that it's okay to take that risk? Have I said something or done something to indicate it's okay? What we find is 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, the answer to that question is yes, and we didn't even know it. So we need to be careful about the feedback. Let's find out why they did what they did first, and let's coach to improve that. Now, if it becomes repetitive after several coaching sessions, you have to move to discipline. I know that. But let's don't start there. All right, so there's the 4 steps, really, of accountability. And there's a 5th element that we uncovered in our research. And it's just called resources. Our job as leaders is to provide resources. We can't expect people to do what we have asked them to do if we don't provide the resources. So we certainly have a responsibility to do that. All right. Let's take a look at the vote before I move on, because we're getting ready to move to the next one. I just click on votes, Abby. There it is. Sarah. And results. Okay. There we go. So how would you rate your leadership? You can see the largest majority of you said average. It's 44% at average. 9% very strong. Yeah, those are leaders I want to come study because I can learn from them. 29% on the upper side, and some view that you have a weak culture there. So we're all around the the maze there, and there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. So hopefully the suggestions from the webinar are helpful for you. Okay? So secret number 2, create connectedness. What are we talking about? In my book, I wrote every problem has within its root cause at least one instance of ineffective communication. So connectedness, a large part of connectedness revolves around communication and our ability to effectively connect people to the work, to the mission of the team, to working safely. Definition. There's some synonyms: integration, communication, assimilation. So with connectivity, we're talking about integration, communication. What type of integration? Well, before I get to that, let me just tell you what's happening here. And I want to talk about the communication chain because communication is so fundamental, thank you, to effectiveness in everything that we're doing. So when you or I communicate with anyone, really our relationships, our execution, everything we do is dependent upon the quality of our communication. I challenge you to find fault in that statement. If you do, send me a question. Let's talk about it some more. I'm not going to go deeper there for time. But everything we do revolves around effective communication or ineffective. And here's what's happening, and here's why there's so many problems in our businesses, in our groups, in our teams. In this case, let's just use what we're doing right here. I'm the sender. You're the receiver. Now, we have a unique challenge here is that I can't see you. As my receiver of this communication, I can't see you. I see that there's people on the call. There's a bunch. But I can't see you. Now, I can see Abby. And I have one other person in the room. His name's Leo, and I can see Leo. So I have a different little experience going on with Abby and Leo that I don't have with you. But nonetheless, the same change happening. So I'm trying to communicate a message to you about 4 secrets of safety leadership. So when I do that, I'm using sensory and tangible means. You can see as you follow around, go from sender up to message formulated. I have a message formulated in my heart and mind that I'm trying to communicate to you. And I'm using a channel to deliver that message. And there are 2 types of channels, sensory or tangible. Sensory channels are channels of communication that deal with the 5 senses. Talking, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting. Those are all sensory forms of communication. Right now I'm using largely talking and listening with you, those of you that are on the webinar. In the room, we're also able to use visual communication. I can see the people in the room, and their body language, their eye contact, their facial expressions are all communicating things back to me without saying a word. So we're communicating in the room using more channels than I'm able to use with you over the webinar. So that's the sensory channel. A tangible channel would be the PowerPoint that you're watching. Every time I show you this communication chain screen on the PowerPoint, it's going to look exactly like that. It's going to say the same thing. Tangible communication channels are just that. Tangible means I can touch it, feel it. And every time it's going to be the same. They're more reliable. They're more permanent in nature. We can store this PowerPoint for 100 years, and 100 years from now, it'll say the same thing, assuming they're able to access the data, because I'm sure communication electronics have changed and evolved and all that. But assuming they can access the data, it'll say exactly what it says today. Whereas I challenge you to try to remember after this webinar and our hour conversation together, try to remember what I've said to you, word for word. Challenge you. Now, we're recording it. The recording of this verbal message makes it tangible. Now we have a tangible recording that will say the same thing every time because it's recorded. But absent the recording, I challenge you to remember what you said to your spouse this morning before you left the house, what you had for lunch yesterday, much less what you told an employee a year ago, right? So tangible is more reliable than sensory, but I would suggest to you that a combination of the two and as many channels as possible are most effective. So we don't want to just rely on one channel. So we're using channels to communicate. sensory and tangible, and then you receive the message. By the way, all this happens in an instant. Thousands of times a day. Tens of thousands of times a day. So now here's something that's happening where the two gray boxes at the top, on the left it says message formulated, on the right it says message interpreted. Now see, I'm formulating the message in my heart and mind. Covey calls that my paradigm, the way I see the world. My heart and mind is unique. My paradigm, the way I see the world is unique to yours, to everybody. Everybody has a unique paradigm according to Covey. That's our filter for communication. Our paradigm is our filter. So I formulate the message through my paradigm, filter it through my way of thinking. It comes out of me in terms of words and things on a PowerPoint slide and so forth. Then it goes through your filter, in your ears and eyes, into your filter, your brain and heart, and you process it. You interpret it. So your filter is different than mine. We have two different filters here filtering the message. So even if I'm using tangible and sensory means and all kinds of both, we're still dealing with these two filters that are unique and distinct. And they're based on our experiences, they're based on our emotions, our personality, our upbringing. Many things go into the way we see the world, creating our paradigm. So that's the big challenge in communication. Everybody's paradigm is different, and I've got to communicate expectations, and I've got to communicate and connect everybody to what we're doing, even though they all have different paradigms. So is it any wonder that we have problems in communication, misunderstanding? Now you see on the bottom side, it just repeats the cycle because the receiver is always sending messages back, even if they're not saying anything. Right now, Abby and Leo are sending messages to me right now because I'm watching them as I have this conversation. And I can see things from them in their body language and expressions. With you, you have a chance on the webinar through questions. You can give us some feedback, and we're using the vote feature of the webinar to allow you opportunity for feedback and input. So that's what's going on all the time. Now the thing is, to connect people to the work, to the mission of our work, to integrate them in, we have this cycle of communication going on all the time because it's through communication that we do that. And there are so many opportunities for misunderstanding. And if you don't believe that, those of you that are married, I would ask you to this question. Have you ever misunderstood your spouse? If you're like me, I have to think every day. And I have to say something like, sweetheart, I'm sorry, that is not what I meant. Please let me try that again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings or whatever. It happens all the time. All right, I need to move on. So connectedness in practice. Leaders need to understand that effective business operations is a safe operation. Safety is good business. We need to connect everybody on our team to that understanding. So that when we work safely, we create a more efficient and a better operation, a stronger operation. There's no separation between safety and operations and budgeting and quality and customer service and anything else that's important to your organization that you measure and pay attention to. Safety is an equal partner, if not more important. A lot of people say safety is more important because we're talking about people getting hurt or killed. Employees are involved. Connectedness involves employee involvement, getting people involved in the process, and everybody's kept informed. There's open communication. All right? So, there's an opportunity for you to provide us some input. How would you rate the leadership group in your organization on its current ability to create connectedness, as we just described it, with all employees? Scale of very strong to very weak. I encourage you to keep voting for a few minutes. I'll talk for a moment longer and we'll look at the results. Creating connectedness is a lot about employee involvement and getting everybody involved in the journey. And it's that concept of people are much more apt to support what they help create. And you can see in Dan Peterson's 6 criteria, it's the 4th criteria for safety excellence. By the way, I want to suggest to you that you could just strike the word safety there, and those 6 bullets still apply. If you're trying to transform your organization toward excellence from any perspective, not just safety, service excellence, operational excellence, production excellence, quality excellence, these 6 criteria still apply. So criteria 4 deals directly with connectedness and connecting the people to the work. Gallup said people must be fully engaged. We hear the word engagement a lot. So we're talking about full engagement of everyone on the team in the safety journey so that they own it. They feel that ownership. There are three elements in connectedness that we need to measure, pay attention to. Employee involvement. How well am I as a leader directing, creating, and facilitating employee involvement in the safety process? How well am I doing that? Sharing information. How well am I as a leader openly sharing relevant safety information with my direct reports? Do I have them effectively connected from an information standpoint? And then integration. How well have I integrated safety into the business operation in my team? Is it an equal partner at least, if not even more important? Does everybody know that not only do I expect them to work safely, but the culture supports that. That if you circumvent a safety protocol, the people working around you won't allow it. Something happens. Someone ignites action because that's not tolerated in our culture. That's what we mean by integrating safety into the operation. So those are the three elements among safety. Looks like 64 of you have voted. Let's take a look. Looks a lot like the first one. So, and I'm not surprised that we see a little heavier group in the weak area because we're talking about communication skills. And human beings just typically are not good at this because of that natural communication cycle that's occurring. That's why I wanted to show you that. Thank you for voting. It's good feedback. The third, I'm going to speed up just a little bit on these last two. The third secret to effective transformational safety leadership, I'm so incredible consciousness, is credible consciousness. There we go. Credible consciousness is believable, reliable, convincing awareness and understanding of what it takes to be safe. If people need to believe that I'm a leader that cares about their safety, and they believe that because of what they see in me and what I know and what I understand and how I demonstrate that in decision making. So I'm believable as a safety leader. I demonstrate credible consciousness. I understand the safety processes within my team. I have the necessary information to make informed decisions. I effectively appraise risk where it exists. You can read the bullets. So it's understanding what it takes to be safe. And I demonstrate that. All right. The leadership group in your team, how are they with credible consciousness? What is their understanding of the safety processes in the team? Do they themselves have the necessary information to make informed safety decisions? And I'm talking about all the way up and down the org chart, not just at the front line. So we're talking executives, middle managers. Do they have the necessary information to make informed safety decisions? Do they effectively appraise risk where it exists? Do they internalize safety concepts and apply them personally? And do they continually learn and grow in their ability to lead a culture of safety excellence? Please give us your feedback on what you see in your organization. I'll come back to that in just a moment. There are two elements in credible consciousness: knowledge and reasoning. Knowledge is simply the effective leader knows what needs to be done to keep everyone safe. And people see that in them. They see that they know. Their knowing is evidenced by doing. And the other element is reasoning. The credible conscious leader makes decisions that make it a safer place to work. Every decision they make is with safety in mind. We have credible consciousness as a transformational safety leader when our decisions demonstrate strong reasoning around safety. All right? Let's take a look, before we go to build trust, let's take a look at your results. We have some opportunities there. I'm not surprised. One thing that we learned in our research project is that some of these skills have not been included in many of the leadership development efforts, programs, packages, trainings that a lot of us have been involved in. We haven't thought of it like this before. So I'm not surprised to see that we have opportunities. Thank you for your feedback. So secret number 4, build trust. You know, Covey Jr., Stephen M.R., that's the son, in his book, The Speed of Trust, says that trust is the one thing that changes everything. I've worked with a lot of leaders that saw trust as sort of this nebulous, fuzzy, abstract concept that wasn't really business related. That's that fuzzy relationship HR stuff I'm not concerned about. Covey makes the point that trust is a core business concept that we must pay attention to. If let me interject this caveat, if a culture of excellence is what you seek. Now, if you're okay with mediocrity, don't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about any of this if you're okay with mediocrity. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you want excellence, we have to build trust in relationships. And it's not that fuzzy love type of trust necessarily that we're talking about. We're talking about reliability and integrity. Dr. Peterson says we can't get effective safety without it. You know, if people don't think we care about them as leaders, they're liable to make any choice in the moment. Maybe even some choices to spite us. Right? Trust is critical. My book, I said, trust builds hope, and hope anticipates excellence. Trust builds hope. You know, if we have a culture of trust, people can reasonably expect that we're going to do something special. Powerful concept. Here's the definition. Reliance on the integrity, strength, ability, surety of a person or thing. Look at integrity, ability, surety. So there's a confident expectation of something. Trust creates that, and that's where the word hope comes from. Some synonyms. I love the word authenticity. Authentic leadership. That ought to be a book. Authentic leadership. Leaders of integrity. Genuineness. Transparency. Powerful words. All related to trust. Here's what it looks like. The leader demonstrates care and concern. They value safety as core. It's got to be a core value, not a priority. They're accessible and available to those they lead. If I'm your leader, then when you need me, I'm there. I make myself available to you. And we have free-flowing communication that inspires others to trust me. You don't feel like I have hidden agendas or I'm hiding something from you or I'm doing something underhanded going around behind your back. We're on the same team. We can look each other eyeball to eyeball. We have authentic conversation. We have authentic communication. Real. And you can trust that. My behavior is predictable. You know that what I'm going to do, you can trust in my performance and behavior because we've built that level between us. So let's vote. Let's provide some input. How would you rate your leadership, the current ability of your leadership to build trust in all relationships, all over the organization? You're talking about your entire leadership group, and how are the relationships all across the organization? Very strong to very weak. While you're voting, I'll talk a little more about trust. 4 elements in trust that are critical. You heard me use some of these words already. Care for the safety of others. An effective, emergent, transformational safety leader demonstrates the concern for the safety of others. People don't doubt that. One of my newest consultants just started in October. I've learned this. He's been traveling with some other consultants, and of course they talk. And a couple of them told me that one word he was using to describe my leadership style was care. I took that as a compliment. He believes that I care about him, not only his safety, but about him as a person, and that I care about making sure he has all the tools and capability to do this work well. So I took that as a compliment. The effective transformational safety leader values safety. I mentioned that briefly. It's a core principle that guides decisions and behaviors. It's never compromised. Safety is one of those things that should never be compromised. That's why it should be a value, not a priority. I'm okay if it's a priority as long as it's also a value. When I fly Delta most of the time and I see the safety video before we take off every time, the president of Delta, Richard Anderson, I feel like I know him because I see it twice a week at least. 4 times a week. I usually have 2 legs per flight. And Richard Anderson says, at Delta, safety is our #1 priority. And I always cringe when I hear that. I go, okay, but is it a value? Is it a value? Does it house itself at the core value level? Because values rarely, if ever, change. That's the difference. Priorities do. The leader demonstrates openness. They're accessible and available to discuss safety concerns, foster an environment of transparency and free-flowing communication. That's open communication, openness as a leader. And they create effective interaction. I communicate with you in a way that makes you feel like you can rely on me to respond. You can predict that, and I behave in a manner that builds confidence in our relationship. It builds surety among us. You know what to expect. So let's look at how you voted. We had 71 people give us feedback there. Pretty similar response pattern. By all 4 voting or response patterns, I would say that this is not uncommon, that effective, emergent, transformational safety leadership is rare, and you're bearing that out in your feedback to us. So these are the 4 secrets of safety leadership, and there again, I think you can probably take out the word safety and be in good shape. Drive accountability, create connectedness, demonstrate credible consciousness, and build trust. We're at the end portion. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to encourage you and allow you an opportunity to ask any questions. It's been my privilege and pleasure to talk to you a little bit about what we've learned at Caterpillar Safety Services about effective safety leadership. And I will turn it back over to Abby at this point. And Abby, you can let us know if we have any questions, and if not, take us out. By the way, there's some resources that you can access that we've relied upon to bring you this information, some of the places that we've received our knowledge about leadership. And we'll now take some questions.
Okay, thanks, David. While I'm giving the folks an opportunity to submit questions, I also want to let everybody on the line know that you have an opportunity also to give us some feedback on what you heard today through the ratings button, which is also up there on the menu bar just above the viewer. You can give us a star rating, and what would be really helpful is if you could give us some ideas for improvement or some specific comments about what you enjoyed or what we could improve for the next event. We do hold these webinars monthly, and we do take your feedback very seriously and try to continuously improve, of course. So let's see if any questions have come through. One thing, David, that some folks may want to know is, you shared a little bit of a sneak peek here today on some pioneering research that Caterpillar is doing around leadership assessment. And can you give us a little next step kind of look forward as to when we might expect this tool to kind of come online and what you and your research team are doing at this point?
Well, we've actually, we're actually testing these 4 secrets. Right now, we're involved with several of our partner organizations, and we built an assessment instrument around these 4 secrets in 14 domains, and we're asking them to help us test it and see if this is what drives a culture of safety excellence. DDI, being a partner with us in this project, will help us validate that work. And our expectation, our hypothesis is that we're trying to prove, it's not proven yet, so this is preliminary. Like you said, it's a sneak peek to the early research. But our hypothesis is, if this is correct, we will be able to look at an organization, its leaders in the eye, and with confidence, backed up by research and data, to say that if you assess your leaders and they perform strongly against this model, you can predict with a reasonable level of certainty that you are on the transformational path to safety excellence. That you have leadership in place doing what they need to do to drive toward excellence. And I think we saw, I think our preliminary research also indicated that a lot of organizations struggle in this area. And that's why we conducted the research in the first place. We had customers telling us, we need help here. We know that we don't have effective leadership in place, but we don't really know what to do about it. So that's why we embarked upon the research in the first place.
Okay. One of the questions that just came through is, of those organizations that have an effective safety culture, how long has it taken them to implement it?
Well, the specific answer there varies because it's relative to execution. You know, I could look at you and say, Abby, if you do exactly what I tell you, and don't vary from this, I can guide you along the way, and we can get there in 2 to 3 years. That never happens because we're human beings. So typically what we see is somewhere in the 2 to 5 year range, and the exact transformation. You know, and let's be serious and candid as well. We're talking about a continuous journey. We're not talking about a begin point. This is not a project. A cultural transformation initiative effort is a journey. I talk about excellence as a journey that never ends. So we never reach perfection. We can reach best in class level, but if you read Jim Collins in his book From Good to Great, Built to Last, and he wrote one, How the Mighty Fall. In that, he says the number one reason people rise to levels of excellence and then fall is because they become complacent. He calls it the hubris born of success. And that is, we just take our eye off the ball. So the human nature is such that sustaining that is challenging. Many people that sustained great things said it's harder to stay there than it was to get there. So 2 to 5 years, somewhere in that range, if you want to transform a culture, you're talking about people changing the way they work and that becoming the new way, the new norms of behavior. And that takes some time. The larger the group, the more challenging the project. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so the next question relates to something you spoke about toward the end of your presentation when you were talking specifically about the president of Delta and talking about safety being a priority. So this person's asking, can you explain again the difference between a priority and a value? Because we hear safety priority and safety is a value. What's the difference?
Main difference is priorities change and values don't. Okay. If you hold something as a core value, John Maxwell puts it this way. Maxwell said, values help us decide today how we're going to behave tomorrow. See, when I determine I value something, I don't have to make decisions in the moment. The value guides my behavior. It is a non-negotiable concept. So if I value, let me do something besides safety. If I value integrity, let's say, I decide I'm going to value integrity. I'm going to live my life trying to do the right thing by people in all of my interactions. That's a simple definition I use for integrity. I do the right thing. Right? People can count on that. So if that's the case, and you offer me $100 to do something unethical, I don't have to think about that. I just say, I can't do that. That goes against everything I believe and who I am, because I value my integrity. So by valuing integrity, I've already made the decision. If I value safety, and you're my boss, and you come to me and say, Dave, we're behind on this project. I need you to hustle up and get this work done. Now, one way my mind could interpret that is to say, okay, whatever it takes, get this done. We're in a hurry. And my mind could say, well, I don't have time to go get the safety gloves. I don't have time to get my hard hat. It's back in my truck. But if I value safety, I don't let that happen. Because I know that and if I believe my boss values safety, then I don't do that. But even if my boss doesn't value safety, if I do, I won't do that. I'll go to the truck and get my hard hat. I'll walk to the storage shed and get the gloves that I need. I'll get the vest. I'll get the whatever I need, the harness, whatever I need. So that's how value drives our behavior, and it's predetermined. Priorities change.
Right. Along the same line, the next question reminds me of the old adage that if safety was really first, nobody would show up to work, right? Because we'd all stay safe at home and just not start to work. So the question was, do you think safety should come first or second? I feel it should come second. After being handed a project, figuring out how to do it safely comes second. I think we should refrain from saying safety first all the time. Just my opinion. So, any feedback on that, David?
Yeah, I respect your opinion, and I respectfully disagree. I mean, you know, that's the wonderful thing about living in America. We have freedom of speech. We can disagree. To say that safety first is a misnomer, and you know, we may be talking about just subtle differences in semantics. I think if safety's first in my life, if it's a core value in my life, I'm not going to jeopardize my safety or the safety of anyone else, no matter what. So I don't care what the project is. See, when values, and typically an organization or a team striving for excellence determines what they value before they strategize of how to get the work done. So values, if you read Collins' Built to Last, what he learned from the organizations that sustain themselves at high levels of performance for a long period of time, what they've done is they've seriously given these things diligent, thoughtful consideration. Why are we here? Why do we exist? What's our mission as an organization, as a team? What's our vision? Where do we want to go? What do we value? What are the non-negotiables? They have seriously considered those things. So in that regard, I would suggest to you that if safety is truly a value, it's considered right there. Now you might say, well, that's third. You did mission, vision, then values. Okay. Well, if you want to, okay, it's third in that exercise. But it's first when it comes to building a team of excellence. It's part of designing that team for success. So I guess it depends on how you look at it. In the micro example that the individual gave, okay. But in a broader context, I want to develop safety as a value. And for me, that comes before executing the work.
Another example that a participant just gave is on the safety first topic. He says, the military has a saying, mission first, safety always. And this person's organization changed it to be service first, safety always. So I think most organizations have some mantra that they use around safety, and I think the essence of the whole conversation here today is about whether or not your actions demonstrate that it's a value, and it goes well beyond the words that you put up on the wall.
You know, and I might agree with this person on one part of this too. When we say safety first, that seems to indicate there's a priority. See, and we don't want it, it's not priority. I like the mission first, safety always. That indicates safety is a value. One of our organizations said safety first always. That's good, right?
Right.
So you know, maybe it's semantics here. I think we're just sort of grappling with some semantics. I like all of that. You know, and I think it's the context in which we execute upon that. Is it truly a core value? Do we communicate that? Do we demonstrate it every day? And whether we say mission first, safety second, or whatever, you know, I mean, or not safety second. I would never say that, because that too indicates priority and that it's lesser priority. I like the mission first, safety always. Safety always, no matter what. That indicates to me value. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, a couple other questions have come through here and comments as well through the ratings, questions about the PDF slides. We are making those available. If you click on the attachments button right up there by the ratings button, you should be able to download a PDF version of the slides. And as far as further information on our webinars, I'm going to advance the slide here, because at safety.cat.com/webinars, you can go and you can review previously recorded webinars that we've given. Like I said, we do one per month. Our next one, it will be February 24th or 25th, depending on where you are in the world. That one will be targeted to our Asia Pacific audience. But those of you in North America who are interested in staying up late, you can chime in live on that one too. And of course, it will be recorded for afterward viewing. One last question, David. I'll throw you a real brain buster here from someone. How can I get a boss like David? So we'll perceive that as some positive recognition for your presentation today.
Yeah, if you have some consulting skills, we're constantly looking for great people.
All right. Well, with that, again, I want to thank everybody who joined us today. Thank you, David, for the great presentation. I welcome all of you again to provide us some feedback through the ratings tool here, and reach out to us at safetyservices@cat.com if you have any follow-up questions, anything that comes to mind that David can answer or I can answer for you after this event. Please do reach out to us. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks again for joining us.